We've seen over the past 15 years the interrelationship between parades and community relations, and that parades very often have negative impacts on community relations across Northern Ireland, and that the annual cycle of parades means that it's difficult to get up a head of steam in improving and building relationships between communities, but we're constantly being interrupted by disputes over parades. We need to break that cycle. We need to find ways of being able for people to parade, to celebrate their culture, but also for them not to provoke tensions and increase hostilities between the communities. We've struggled to develop an agreed policy approach to the issue of contested parades. The Parades Commission was established in 1997. It's been contested since that time. And it remains for the politicians to resolve that issue now. Over the period of the last 15 or so years, we have seen improvements in many areas. We have the example of Derry, London Derry, where parades are not nearly as contested as they once were, where the apprentice boys are effectively able to walk the walls in the way they wanted. We've seen similar improvements in a number of smaller locations where the tensions may still be there, but they've been largely resolved, where people are able to parade, and in some cases people protest, and the parades don't have the same level of impact that they once have. The trouble is really in those areas where those local accommodations haven't been agreed, where no local deals have been reached. And the problem is also that parades still have the potential to escalate beyond the locality to other influence disputes and tensions in other areas of Northern Ireland. So it remains imperative that we find an overarching solution to the problem. I think everybody here recognises that the parading issue is one that needs to be resolved. People accepted that it was high on the agenda, that it was high on the agenda of the Haas talks, and was one of those issues that I thought we were edging towards a possible solution. I think that of the three issues that were subject of Haas, parading was probably the one that could have been addressed most effectively. There are limited options for how we can address the disputes over parades, how we can find the means of resolving issues. Basically, in my opinion, it's going to be a Parades Commission Mark II, or a version of the Parades Commission, i.e. there's going to be an external body that makes some form of decision. My own opinion would be that it's the framework in which you make the decision that becomes important rather than the body that makes the decision. At the moment, the focus is on the Parades Commission as a body, and I think what needs to be done is shifting more towards developing a clearer human rights framework for deciding on individually disputed parades, and look at the wider context in which those issues have been addressed through the European Court of Human Rights and under the European Convention, so that the principles around parades is framed not purely within the local context, but within the European-wide context, within standards that all organisations and communities are expected to adhere to across Europe. And I think if we look at the framework under which the decisions are being made, it will make it less important, the question of which body is making those decisions. I do think it may be necessary to take some of the decisions through a more judicial process at some stage to help establish standards, but that would be one variation on those themes. But I think as long as it's framed within the human rights framework, we'll be on the right track. I think it's important that any external decision-making body like the Parades Commission or like a judiciary position should only kick in exceptional circumstances, that where possible, decision-making should be agreed at a local level through dialogue, through discussion between competing groups, in the way that it's been achieved in Derry and in some other locations. We need to always encourage that form of dialogue and only see adjudication of some form as the last resort. And we have seen that it can work if people are prepared to go into it, and people are prepared to go into it with an honest intention, and they're prepared to stand over their decisions. I think if we're going to be looking at local dialogue, we need to make sure that that's as inclusive as possible, that it's not just left to those most intimately engaged in the disputes, that includes wider context of civil leadership, includes the business community, and all those who have a potential interest in the locality, that it's a widening up of the process perhaps than in some locations nowadays.